Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. And please put a review on my podcast. That will certainly help in getting the word out there and creating more listenership. Episode 247, Ethel Benn. Part 1. Ethel Benn, known as Ettie, was an extraordinarily athletic thief who never learnt from her mistakes. Ethel Violet May Evans was born on the 17th of January 1895 in Petersham, New South Wales. She was the daughter of Joseph Samuel Evans III, a brickmaker, and Annie Rudy. Joseph Evans's grandfather, Joseph Samuel Evans, was Irish and emigrated in 1825 as a soldier in the 4th Regiment. He was in the 80th Regiment when he came to Australia. Ironically, he signed up to the Mounted Police 4 years after his arrival on the 4th of December 1829. He served at Bathurst, New South Wales, and rose to the rank of sergeant. He had a relationship with an Irish convict, Bridget Finnegan, who was 11 years younger than Joseph. Bridget, a dairymaid, was convicted of stealing a watch in County Louth in May 1831 and was sentenced to 7 years transportation. She came out on the Surrey in November 1832 when she was 24. She married John Purvis in Bathurst in 1834. Even though Bridget married John Purvis, she asserted that Samuel Evans was the father of Joseph, who was born on the 31st of January 1835. Bridget received her certificate of freedom in 1841 and stated she was the wife of John Purvis. Bridget had another son that she named James Edgar Evans in March 1841 in the Parramatta Female Factory. Joseph was discharged from the Mounted Police in May 1841 and discharged from the Army in July 1841, invalidated out to a pension. He was then Chief Constable at Molong in 1848 and Dubbo in 1851. Bridget then married James Abnett in April 1848 in Sydney. Bridget died in Mudgee, New South Wales, where Samuel Evans died 3 years prior. Joseph Evans married Rosanna O'Brien in 1837 in Bathurst. They had 2 children, one in 1838 and one in 1840. Joseph and Bridget's son, Joseph Evans Jr., married Elizabeth Patience Miles in Parramatta in May 1866, when Joseph was 31 and Elizabeth 17. He was a shepherd in the Molong district and they had 11 children together, with their son Joseph III being the 4th born. They moved to Petersham, New South Wales, where he worked as a blacksmith. Ettie's mother, Annie Rudy, was born to a Swiss father, Andrew Rudy, who moved to New South Wales from Victoria in 1866. He was naturalised in 1876. Andrew Rudy married Mary Spreadborough in Sydney in 1887. They'd already had 6 children, and 2 more were born after their marriage. Mary Spreadborough married William Thorpe in 1867 in Penrith and had 3 children to him. The last was born in 1870 and brought up as a Rudy. Mary lived with Andrew Rudy as his wife from 1872, although they did not legally marry until 1887. The first we hear of Ettie is on the 17th of March 1911 in the Canawindra and Eugowra News. An exciting chase at Cowra. Ethel Violet Evans, about 18 years of age, who had been remanded at the police court yesterday morning for stealing, escaped from the Cowra lockup where she was in custody. The girl was practically on parole in the lockup premises and escaped by the back entrance. Police and civilians, numbering 50, including a number of children, were in hot pursuit, but the girl managed to evade them, and early this morning no trace was found of her. The escaped girl boarded the train at Westville, a siding some miles away this morning, and was rearrested at Mandurama on arrival here. So on the 22nd of March 1911 in the Lithgow Mercury in the Lithgow Police Court. Richard Benn, on remand, was charged with that he did fraudulently take away Ethel Violet May Evans, a female under the age of 21 and of the age of 16 years, out of the possession and against the will of Samuel James Evans, with intent to carnally know her at Lithgow on the 8th of March. Samuel Evans deposed that he knew the accused, who was keeping company with his daughter. He did not reside with them.
His daughter lived with him and also left home on the 7th of this month. She went down to her mother's laundry. He heard that she left Lithgow and had no idea where she was until the police brought him news of her whereabouts. He did not give her permission to leave his house, nor did he give anyone permission to take her away. He gave his consent to the accused to marry his daughter. The marriage would have taken place on the 18th. Ethel Violet May Evans deposed that up to the time she left Lithgow, she was living with her mother and father at McKellar's paddock. She left home on the 7th. She knew the accused. She'd been keeping company with him for 9 months. She was engaged to be married to him and had secured her mother's consent. She was not married to him. Witness and the accused walked to Marangaroo Station. The accused bought tickets and they got on the train and went as far as Blaney. They stopped at a hotel at Blaney for one night. The next day they proceeded to Mandurana. They then went to Cowra where she was arrested. She left her home on the 7th because her father had threatened to beat her. She told the defendant that she was going away and he said he would not let her go by herself. She was 16 years of age on the 17th of January. The accused said he wished to make a statement. Ethel Evans came to him in the night and said that she was going to clear out. The next morning he asked her not to go, but she replied that she would not stop at home. He knew that he had got her into trouble. He decided to go with her with the intention of getting married at Blaney. He did not wish to call any witnesses. The accused was committed for trial at the Parramatta Quarter Sessions to be held on the 24th of April. Bail was granted for £80 and 2 sureties of £40 each. And on the 10th of April 1911 in the Lithgow Mercury, the Attorney-General declined to file a bill against Richard Benn, who was recently charged at the Lithgow Police Court with abducting Ethel Violet May Evans, a female under 21 years and of the age of 16 years, out of the possession and against the will of her father. The accused was committed by the Lithgow bench to stand his trial at the Parramatta Quarter Sessions on the 24th of April, but was released from custody in the middle of last week. The next day, Ethel married Richard William Benn at Lithgow. Only a month after their marriage, Ethel was charged at the North Sydney Police Court on the 15th of May 1911 of stealing. She was charged 40 shillings or 21 days hard labour if not paid. They had a daughter, Ethel Evelyn Benn, known as Ettie as well, 7 months after their marriage, and they went on to have another 6 children. Ethel was charged with stealing on the 20th of August 1914. She was also charged with stealing on the 25th of January 1915, however this was suspended. Then on the 3rd of March 1915, she was charged with 7 charges of larceny, and this was outlined in the Sydney Sun on the 29th of April 1915. Breaking and entering, woman charged. At the Redfern Police Court today, Ethel Violet May Benn, alias Griffin, alias Keynes, aged 20, was charged with breaking and entering. Evidence was given that an entrance was gained to the house of Albert Wagner of Mascot on the 22nd of February while the occupants were away. Property worth £7.10 was taken and a portion of this was recovered. Benn was committed for trial and was ordered to stand her trial on a charge of breaking and entering, also the residence of Donald Tollis of Mascot, and stealing property worth £8. She was remanded to Balmain on a further charge, while a number of other charges were withdrawn. Sergeant Leonard asked that Benn be ordered to find bail. Benn declared that they made it very hard for her and her young baby at Long Bay Prison. They had threatened to put her in the punishment cells. The magistrate did not make any fresh order as to bail. And on the 8th of May 1915, in the Quarter Sessions, Ethel Violet May Benn and Richard Benn were charged with stealing in a dwelling at North Sydney and receiving property to the value of £5. The accused were found not guilty on the first charge but guilty on the second and were remanded for sentence. On the 7th of January 1916 in the Maitland Daily Mercury, at the Central Police Court in Sydney, Ethel Violet May Benn, aged 20, was charged with breaking and entering the dwelling house of John Carroll of Ultimo on the 18th of December and stealing a silver watch, a gold chain, a sovereign purse, a gold bangle, a pair of gold sleeve links, a lady's gold ring, a gold scarf pin and a suit of clothes, valued at £15. She was undefended. According to the evidence for the prosecution, Mrs. Carroll had occasion to leave her residence for a few minutes, and on her return she missed the property, the bulk of which had been taken from a wardrobe. Entrance had been effected by means of a broken window. Benn was committed for trial. When the question of bail was being considered by the court, it was stated by the arresting constable that according to the records, the accused had been previously charged with housebreaking, there being 20 to 30 charges. She'd been sentenced for some of those offences and was out on licence at the time that the offence was alleged to have been committed. And on the 31st of January 1916 in the Sydney Sun, is she a kleptomaniac? A young woman, Ethel May Benn, who had been found guilty of receiving stolen property, was brought up for sentence at the Darlinghurst Court of Sessions this afternoon. The woman piteously pleaded for Judge Docker for leniency, stating she'd just buried her baby. His Honour said that he had received a letter from the husband of the prisoner in which it was suggested that his wife be medically examined for the purpose of ascertaining whether she was a kleptomaniac. The prisoner interrupted His Honour and said she had been bitten by a dog some time ago and often felt very funny in her head. His Honour sent the woman to the Long Bay Reformatory for Women for 2 years with light labour. A number of previous convictions for stealing were recorded against her. On the 30th of January 1917, in the Sydney Morning Herald, at the Court of Sessions, Ethel May Benn, a married woman who was undefended, pled not guilty to a charge of having on the 6th broken and entered into the dwelling house of Eliza Scott at Ashfield and stole 3 rings, a brooch and some articles of clothing. The accused denied the charge and stated that the Crown witnesses were mistaken in their identification of her. The jury returned a verdict of guilty and the prisoner was remanded for sentence. And in October 1917 in the New South Wales Police Gazette, Ethel May Benn, alias Evans, alias Griffin, alias Keynes, 22, charged with breaking and entering the dwelling house of James Taylor and stealing clothing and money, valued at £5, with the clothing recovered, has been arrested by Sydney Police. Further charged with breaking and entering the dwelling of Marianne Tyrrell and stealing clothing, jewellery and money, valued at £26, recovered, with breaking and entering the dwelling house of Reginald Rothery and stealing clothing valued at £12. Committed for trial on all charges at the Court of Sessions, 2 other similar charges withdrawn. Remanded to Newcastle and further charged with breaking and entering the dwelling house of Harold Gale and stealing clothing valued at £10, and on warrant with breaking and entering the dwelling house of William Lane and stealing jewellery and money valued at £6 and 15 shillings. Committed for trial on both charges at the Newcastle Circuit Court. Further charged with breaking the condition of her release on licence revoked. So it seems that it's really catching up with Ettie at this time. So this was becoming a pattern in Ettie's life. As mentioned, she was 16 and pregnant when her first arrest was on the records, and she'd escaped Cowra Jail at that time. She would often commit thefts and then outrun the police, but she would return to her known haunts where she was inevitably arrested. Ettie had at least 6 children. The older ones would sometimes attend court hearings and wail pitifully when she was sentenced. Ettie gave birth to at least 3 children while in jail. In July 1920, in the Police Gazette, Ethel May Benn, alias Ethel May Evans, alias Griffin, 24, charged with stealing jewellery valued at £20 in the home of Albert Nolan, has been arrested by Parramatta Police. Committed for trial at Parramatta Sessions with bail allowed. Further charged with being found in the dwelling house of Vincent Rutledge for an unlawful purpose to steal, sentenced to 21 days light labour, and appeal lodged. On the 24th of July 1920 in the Cumberland Argus and Fruit Growers Advocate of Parramatta. At the Parramatta Court on Wednesday, Ethel May Benn, on bail, who had been committed for trial on another charge, was charged with having been found for an unlawful purpose on the 1st of July in the dwelling house of Vincent Rutledge of Harris Park. She pled not guilty. Constable Lavelle deposed that in the afternoon of the 1st he saw the defendant at the Parramatta Police Station and charged her as above. She replied, "I am innocent. I was not in Harris Park today." The following morning had her lined up with 6 women for the purpose of identification. Mrs. Corduroy identified her as the woman whom she'd seen coming out of Mr. Rutledge's house the previous day, and Mrs. Burgess identified her as the woman she'd seen going along Marion Street and Harris Street. Ivy Gertrude Rutledge, a married woman residing with her husband in Harris Park, said she was at home in her bedroom on the morning of the 1st. When she left the bedroom, everything was in order, and when she returned to it again, the wardrobe door was open and clothes from the drawer were strewn across the bed. She'd been out of the room for half an hour. The front door and bedroom window were open all the time. The front gate was shut when she left the bedroom, and when she returned, it was open. And on the 8th of December 1920, in the Launceston Examiner, from Sydney, Ethel Violet May Benn, a young married woman who had a baby in her arms, appeared in the Central Police Court today on 3 charges of breaking into dwelling places and stealing goods. It was stated that most of the stolen property had been recovered from pawn shops. And on the 3rd of February 1921 in the Sydney Evening News, Ethel Violet May Benn, a young woman who pled guilty to 5 charges of breaking and entering and stealing, was sentenced by Judge Backhouse at the Darlinghurst Sessions today to 2 years light labour in the State Reformatory. His Honour said that if later on some respectable person would look after the accused, or if she would go to a home, he would recommend she be allowed to go. And she was taken to a maternity home to save the baby from the disgrace of having Long Bay Jail listed on its place of birth. Unfortunately for prison authorities, Ben managed to escape from this home, and this led to a temporary ban on the practice of allowing inmates to deliver their babies outside the prison. Ettie's pregnancies did not seem to hamper her criminal activities or lessen her daring. She was a renowned drain piper. She would scale drain pipes to enter homes through open windows on the 2nd story or above, even when heavily pregnant. On the 10th of April 1923 in the Sydney Morning Herald, Ethel Violet May Benn pled not guilty to a charge of stealing from the dwelling of Adam Dean at Marrickville 2 finger rings, the property of Emily Dean, on the 16th of January. There was a second count of receiving. The accused was found guilty on the first count and sentenced to 1 year and 11 months light labour in the State Reformatory for Women. His Honour said, if some time arrangement can be made for you to go away, I may consider the question of your release on licence. And on the 11th of May 1923 in the Albury Banner and Wodonga Express, Ethel Violet May Benn, whom the police described as the cleverest woman thief in Sydney, was sentenced to 2 years light labour in the State Reformatory for Women. Benn received her first sentence when a girl, and her total sentences amount to 40 years but were reduced to 10 years by concurrencies. One police officer told of giving chase to the pregnant Benn. Seeing her run into a house with a backyard terminating with a 6-metre drop, he believed that he had her trapped. But Benn leapt down the embankment, landed lightly on her feet and scarpered. The officer decided not to follow. In 1923, Ettie, again pregnant, caused a sensation when she escaped from Long Bay Jail with a friend. The pair scaled the prison walls before jumping from a high perimeter wall. However, this time Ettie's luck had run out. She broke her leg when she landed. Authorities found her and returned her to a cell. When the time came for her to give birth, her leg was not healed, and so it was decided to risk letting her to go to a hospital. On this occasion, kept under heavy guard, she did not escape. Ettie had a long criminal record. As early as 1920, she told police she'd committed so many robberies that she could no longer keep track of where she'd pawned the stolen goods. On the 17th of June 1923 in the Sydney Sunday Times, baby in jail. If it were true that inhumane treatment had been given in Long Bay Jail to the baby of Ethel Violet Benn, the prisoner who recently broke her leg in an attempt to escape from the institution, the public would protest in horror. The Minister for Justice should continue the closest investigation. Early in 1921, Ettie was convicted of stealing and sent to Long Bay, but as she was approaching confinement, arrangements were made for her to be admitted into a maternity home. She went to the home but left it. Rearrested by the police, she was again received into the Long Bay Reformatory when the authorities once more arranged for her to enter a maternity hospital so that the child would be spared the stigma of being born in prison. Once more, Ben refused to remain in the home, and eventually the child was born at Long Bay, but not in a cell. From the 3rd of February 1921, the child remained with the mother until September the 30th, 1922, when both were released. On the 5th of May of this year, Ben was sentenced to 2 years for stealing from a dwelling. She did not take the child back to jail with her. The official departmental report states that the reports of inhumane treatment are entirely without foundation. During their incarceration, the mother and child occupy a large, bright, comfortable double room, A special bed and bedding were provided for the mother, and a cradle and all necessities for the child. The room opened into a large hall and was attached to a special bathroom. Otherwise, the mother and baby spend most of their time in the open air or in the hall. All the time, both Ettie and the baby were under the personal care and observation of the jail doctor, and when the child left with Ettie in 1922, the doctor certified that it was healthy and intelligent. Since then, the department explains it has had nothing whatsoever to do with the child, and the reason it is now in Prince Alfred Hospital, being admitted last Tuesday, can be no means laid on the feet of the department or Long Bay officials. Benn has a criminal history beginning in 1911, and on 2 occasions at least, when she has been released, her licence was revoked owing to her failure to fulfil conditions. And in the Sydney Smith's Weekly on the 23rd of June 1923, Ettie Benn's dreadful record. Ettie Violet May Benn, who last week with another inmate made a daring effort to escape from the women's portion of the Long Bay Penitentiary, is the best advertised woman criminal of Australia. Though not 30 years of age, Ettie Benn's criminal record is extraordinary. It started in 1915 when at the Sydney Quarter Sessions she was sentenced to 2 years on each of 7 charges of stealing. 18 months later, she was convicted at Sydney and also at Newcastle on charges, quite a number of them, of breaking, entering and stealing. The aggregate sentences for these crimes amounted to 10 years. Little seems to have been heard of her until early 1921, when she was the recipient of sentences made concurrent of 2 years' imprisonment on 5 charges of housebreaking. When late last year she regained her liberty, she set out on more housebreaking stunts about Glebe and Balmain, culminating in her recent appearances before judges at Darlinghurst. For nearly a dozen burglaries she received sentences, which being concurrent meant about 21 months' detention. Ben is the wife of a jailbird. His record does not equal hers. She is Australia's really worst woman and is a silent worker. A miserable male specimen of humanity, not her husband, stood beside her in the dock at Darlinghurst early in May, charged with being associated with her in her nocturnal outings. He was convicted of receiving stolen property. Elsie May shouldered all the blame. This woman might have been declared an habitual criminal had she not appealed for leniency on the grounds that she was soon to become a mother. Already she has given birth to a child in jail. On one occasion, out at the penitentiary, a canary escaped from its cage and flew high to the rafters of a corridor. Head matron and all were deeply distressed at the escape of a prison pet and despaired of its recapture. Ettie volunteered to bring Dickie back to his cage, and she did. She clambered up the wall and posts, reached the rafters, and returned the canary to the aviary. Though about 28 years of age, Ettie Benn looks much older. She's the mother of 4 children. Reformation of Ettie Violet May Benn has never been attempted. Perhaps it has never been discussed. On the 12th of October 1924, in the Brisbane Truth, criminal adventuress, woman whose babies have been cradled in crime. Ethel Violet May Benn is about the swiftest bit of femininity this side of the line, and the pity of it from one point of view is that she's a mother. It is believed that she has a husband. It is certain that she has borne children. Born in an environment of shame, cradled in crime, and reared in an atmosphere of villainy, what can the future hold for them? The redoubtable Mrs. Benn claims 2 Australian championships. She has for long been admitted to be Sydney's worst woman, while she undoubtedly holds the Women's Athletic Championship for her many extraordinary feats, giving her an undeniable claim to this title. She's now 29, and her career began when she was a girl with her hair down and wearing short skirts. Life in Petersham in those days was a little too quiet for Ethel. She craved excitement and a chance to prove her athletic abilities. The crowded sparkling trays in jewellers' and second-hand shops gave her an idea. It would be a simple job to grab a handful of rings and bangles and then to madly dash down the street. If the big lumbering man behind the counter was able to catch her, she would be very much surprised. But after one successful exploit of this kind, Ethel ever reached herself. Dashing out of a jeweller's shop, she walked right into the arms of the law. But it was her first offence, and there was still a chance for her reformation, and she was released as a first offender. Ethel was quickly at work again. This time she took on a burglary. She was only an apprentice, and all apprentices make mistakes. She slipped, and a term of jail followed. It was not until 1914 that she finished serving her apprenticeship, and it was during the following year that she really came into prominence. On the 3rd of May of that year, she appeared at the Sydney Quarter Sessions to answer 7 charges of breaking, entering and stealing, and was found guilty on all counts, receiving 2 years imprisonment on each charge, 14 years in all. But the sentences were concurrent, so she really only got 2 years. 7 months after her appearance at the sessions, she again took to the dock. This was on the 28th of January 1916, and the charge against her was burglary and stealing. 2 years was the judge's decision. The months rolled by, and Ethel Violet May was launched again upon a long-suffering society. It was on this occasion that she utilised her athletic prowess once again. A constable at North Sydney happened to bump into Ethel when she was in a somewhat compromising situation. Faced with only 2 alternatives, flight or arrest, and the inevitable charge of burglary and entering, Ethel chose the former course. Like a flash from a gun, she darted into a narrow, darkened street. The big-boned constable flew after her, but although he was young and slim and of an athletic stamp, he could make but little impression upon the speedy girl ahead of him. Down a side lane ducked Ethel, into a house via the front door, cutting again through the back. In this way, setting an erratic course, she careered through 6 houses, much to the amazement and surprise of the occupants, and after her, now somewhat out of breath, flew the constable. As the latter hurtled out of the back door of one house, he was just in time to see Ethel scramble over an 8-foot wall. As she dropped down the other side, she waved cheerily to him. "Goodbye, boy, I'll see you some other day," she cried. That wall was too formidable an obstacle for the constable, and he tackled it, but one try was enough, and he gave up. He was quite prepared to give Ethel the palm as champion runner and champion jumper. On another occasion, Ethel outwitted a constable in a somewhat similar manner. At the end of a long chase, she found herself faced with capture or taking a 20-foot jump. The latter seemed a foolhardy project, but with a very distinct chance of a couple of broken limbs. But nothing daunted Ethel Violet May. She leapt down from the high back wall to the street below, landing on hands and knees. But beyond a couple of slight cuts in the palm of one hand, she got off scot-free. Up above, the pursuing constable paused and was lost. He reckoned it wasn't worth taking risks, not for all the Ethels in existence. It might have been these experiences which determined Ethel to change her ground. Anyhow, she decided on a health recruiting trip to other climes, but only succeeded in getting as far as Newcastle. Whether she played poker on the train and lost her money, or whether she became enamoured of the coal city, she alone only knows. For several weeks, she led the Newcastle police on a regular 2-step. Day after day, fresh burglaries were reported to them. Buildings which seemed incapable of being entered without the aid of a ladder were broken into by a lone criminal who appeared to be a super athlete. Newcastle did its best, but they had to give it up. Whoever was responsible was just a shade too fast for them. Sydney advised Newcastle immediately, as they knew the way that crooks worked. And in the experienced eyes of the Sydney police, the Newcastle cases spoke of only one name, Ethel Violet May Benn. Ethel's run of luck was quietly nipped in the bloom. A pretty stiff dose of imprisonment was handed to her for activities both in Newcastle and Sydney. She took it complacently, and the aggregate of her sentences were 10 years. Possessing a peculiar mental make-up, the hard-running Ethel always set a hot pace. She was a fast lady in more ways than one, and no sooner had she earned her liberty that she would quickly run up a string of burglaries to her credit. She never takes a breather, but plunges with complete daring and abandon. Early in 1921, just after her release from the combined Sydney-Newcastle sentences, she again was brought to answer 5 charges of breaking, entering and stealing, and she received 2 years' imprisonment on each charge, but the sentences were again concurrent. She was released in the early part of last year, and in May was again foul of the law. This time a dozen burglaries committed around Glebe and Balmain were sheeted home to her. On each charge she was handed 21 months' imprisonment concurrent, bringing her total aggregate sentences up to 70 years. Somewhat in the background, Ethel has a husband. He's something of a mystery, and he only bobs up now and again. As soon as Ethel goes in, he disappears. But somehow or other he always manages to meet her again when she comes out. That's about all that is known concerning him. One feature of Ethel's hectic career that stands above all others is the number of babies she has had in jail, or at any rate whilst serving a sentence. In this way, she's given birth to 3 or 4 children, and as already described, she goes on occasion to take advantage of the event to escape from custody. What will happen to these infants can only be conjectured. Maybe they will grow up law-abiding citizens, but the chances are that heredity will take its toll, and they will make their mark in as much the same manner as their mother has done. Let us hope not. And Ethel Violet May will shortly again be released. It's any odds that her liberty will be short, and probably sweet, the police think, but Mrs. Benn may have seen the folly of things and the futility of following a career of crime. It's nearly time too. On the 19th of October 1924 in the Sydney Truth, Ethel Violet May Benn, expert woman housebreaker and athlete extraordinary, will be released shortly from Long Bay. But she's unlikely to trouble the authorities again to any great extent. She is more or less a cripple. The trouble may be overcome, but it's unlikely, and the probability is that she will have to use crutches to get around once she has liberty. So no longer will she escape the law's crutches by her fleetness of foot. No longer will she baffle and amaze perspiring constables by her 100-yard dashes and her 20-foot leaps. It looks like retirement for Ethel Violet May, and the police won't feel downhearted over it either. In part 2, I'll continue to outline Ettie's escapades as well as what happened to her children.
If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.